By far the biggest problem that I've seen for people who are going the self-taught route in programming, so they're trying to teach themselves the code so they can get a job as a software developer or a programmer, is that people self-sabotage themselves all the time and they don't even know they're doing it. And you can most often see this where people will get really, really excited to do this, they go all in on it, and they eventually burn out, only to keep repeating that cycle over and over again. And I've met people who are doing this for years. So like 5 years, they've been trying to learn. They keep going through these cycles where they get really excited, they're gonna learn it, and then they end up fizzling out. And so in this video, what I wanted to cover with you is, what does that mean to self-sabotage? Are you doing it? Also a little bit about why we're doing it, and then we'll get into how to overcome it so that you're not stuck trying to do this for years. So you get into a programming career as soon as you possibly can, you move on with your life, and you're happy. Now, if you're wondering who I am here, I'm Andy Sterkowitz. I'm a self-taught programmer. I taught myself to code back in 2014. I landed my first job in 2015. And now I'm a mentor and coach to people who are trying to do the same thing. So before we move ahead here, go ahead and hit the subscribe button below so you can get all my new content. I really cover things about how to become a software developer, also how to land that first job. Also, by the way, make sure to hit that bell icon to make sure you get all the notifications every time I put out a new video. So what exactly do I mean when I say that people are self-sabotaging or that they are getting in their own way? What I most often see is that people have preconceived notions and beliefs about what it takes to teach themselves to code. And usually it involves some unrealistic expectations, meaning they have to put in some ungodly amount of hours per week, that there's no way they could do this just by spending maybe 20 hours a week doing this. Or they think that their amount of activity that they have to do is insane. And so what this often leads to, if you have unrealistic expectations about what it takes to be a software developer, then if you can't possibly reach those high expectations, you're going to have problems. You're going to burn out, or you're going to get very discouraged. And so this leads to what I call the boom-bust cycle of trying to become a software developer. You can apply this to pretty much anything, weight loss, learning a new language, learning a new skill. But I so often see this in not only myself in previous attempts where I've failed, but in a lot of people who I have helped to overcome this. And the boom-bust cycle basically goes like this. So it starts off with the greatest part, which is you get inspired, you get motivated. Maybe you had a friend tell you could do this. Maybe you watched one of my YouTube videos and you were like, oh my gosh, I could change my life. Maybe your job sucks and you could see an opportunity to get out of that. All great reasons to do it, but either way, that's where it starts. It starts with the inspiration. From there, you go from inspiration to what I call the frenetic activity stage. And since you have all these expectations in your head about what it takes to be successful doing this, you start just going all in on it, right? And when I say all in, I mean you go from 0 to 100 very quickly. You buy a ton of courses, you watch a ton of YouTube videos, you are constantly Googling stuff, you read everything you can get your hands on, maybe you join a few different Discord or Slack groups, but you just go all in. Another part of the frenetic activity stage that is often overlooked is that people start sleeping less because they're trying to do more in the day. They figure if they sacrifice on sleep, that's more time they could be doing something. They also tend to increase their caffeine usage because caffeine helps them to stay up. It also helps them to focus. Another thing that happens as well is often people stop eating as healthy, or they stop going to the gym, which are all things that help you to recuperate. And so this frenetic activity stage can last for a couple of days. It can last for a couple of weeks. If you're lucky, maybe it can last for a couple of months, but eventually you will hit your limit and you cannot keep up this frenetic activity stage. And so you move to the next stage of the process where you run out of gas, you hit the wall, and you get disillusioned. So when you kept up this frenetic activity for as long as you have, for again, a few weeks, or maybe a few months, your body will eventually give it out on you. Your spirit will give out on you. You just kind of get to the point where like, you just can't quite do it anymore. Maybe you wake up one day and you're like, I don't want to think about code. I just don't want to do anything but code. And what's even worse is a lot of times you'll look back on the few weeks or few, maybe even months that you've been doing this, you'll see how hard you've worked, you know how hard you've stressed yourself out, and you don't really feel like you've made that much progress. You feel like you've done so much and you're like, if this is what it's gonna take, and if I have to do this for another few more months, how am I ever gonna do this? And it feels like you're climbing Mount Everest without an oxygen tank. And so what happens at this stage is you become very disillusioned. You can't see a way forward and you're like, I'm not even sure if this is even worth it anymore. And so that moves you to the last stage of the process, and that's called what I call the avoidance or withdrawal stage. So either you actively avoid doing the work because it causes you anxiety, it causes you pain because you feel ashamed that you had to quit this, that it hurts your self-esteem, or you actively withdraw from it because you're like, you know what, I burnt out, I need to retract to get my energy back and get back to where I'm motivated. And this cycle will often repeat repeat itself. So you'll go back to the top and you'll just, maybe something happens where you get inspired, you get motivated, and then you go through that entire thing again because your beliefs hadn't changed. You just figured, okay, this time I'm going to do it a little bit different. And the worst part is, the more often you do the cycle, the more likely it is that you're going to quit after a few cycles, because subconsciously you remember each time you fail, and it does bruise your confidence a little bit. It bruises your self-esteem because you're like, you know what, if this is my 7th time doing it, am I really cut out for this? So that's the cycle that I see so often people engage in. It's not the fact that they are, don't have the right learning materials or something like that. It's their beliefs about what it takes. They think they have to, work 80 hours a week to do this. They have to slave over it. They have to sacrifice everything in their life. They can't have fun anymore. And that's actually the thing that makes them fail. So you have to know this about yourself, about our own tendencies, if you're really going to overcome this cycle. And so what I'm about to talk about here is how to overcome this boom-bust cycle, how to get out of getting in your own way, essentially. So the first thing I recommend that you do if you're going to be successful in this, if you're going to overcome this cycle of self-sabotage, is you have to start off with creating a realistic system for yourself, a realistic system that you can stick to for a long period of time. I've actually talked about creating that system in a previous video, which I'll post right here, about being more productive. And what I talked about is, if you're going to achieve this goal of becoming a programmer, you have to reverse engineer how you're going to get there. So you have to start with your yearly goals, go down to your monthly goals, your weekly goals, and your daily goals. And so if you're going to have a system about how you're going to study, about how you're going to attack building your portfolio, you have to figure out one that's going to be sustainable. So for many of you guys who are working a full-time job, even if it's part-time, maybe you have a family, you have to look at your schedule realistically and say, how many hours a week can I put into this? And then you have to figure out, how many hours a week can I put into active study time, like building projects that I'm going to put in my portfolio, versus passive study time. And instead of assuming that you have to do this, 40 or 50 or 60 or 70 or more hours per week to actually be successful, just look at how much time you have and go from there. So whatever system you design, make it realistic. We're all human, by the way. I'm human. I know I have my faults. I know I get distracted from time to time. I know I have my weaknesses. So whenever I design a system for myself, I give myself a lot of leeway in the beginning, because I know that, hey, for example, if I'm trying to learn yoga, I'm not flexible at all. I'm just going to go into it and just try to show up every single day, because that's much more important. So create that realistic system that you think you can adhere to for a long time, for years potentially, if that's what you need, because that's the thing that's going to be much more important than having some sort of system that you're going to try to do in a month and cram it all in. It's just not going to work. From there, the second thing that I recommend for you to get out of this cycle is to focus on consistency over everything else. The only way you're going to learn to program, the only way you're going to really make progress with this, is if you're going to do this for a long period of time. I have met very few people who can pick this up quickly. And so what you have to get used to is showing up every single day, building that habit of showing up and studying, building that habit of reading code, building that habit of putting things together, creatively problem solving, day in and day out over a period of time. And while it's not very sexy, it's actually really boring to say that, because sometimes you show up for a week straight, you've been studying and you feel like you're not really going anywhere. The thing is, the progress that happens over long periods of time is often invisible until it's not, meaning like you have this sudden period of growth that comes out of nowhere. Even though the past maybe few weeks or a few months, it feels like you haven't been going anywhere. But that's how programming works. In fact, that's how any skill that's hard to attain basically works. So you have to get much more comfortable with the idea of being consistent, of preserving the habit of showing up every single day, than trying to cram in as much possible work in a short period of time as you can. I will bet on anybody who is able to do this for months or even years, who's able to keep up that habit despite all these crazy things that go on in their life, than somebody who is going to be really motivated for a month or two that's going to try to cram it all in. It just tends to be how that works. So focus on consistency, and more than anything else, focus on preserving the habit of showing up and following that system, that realistic system that we talked about in step 1. The last thing I'd say about avoiding this self-sabotage loop is that you want to focus on recuperation and re-energizing yourself and recharging yourself. So a big part of your system or your plan should be making sure you get enough sleep. I hope this goes without saying, but so many people cut corners on sleep because they think it doesn't matter. Well, sleep helps you to think more clearly. It helps to regulate your emotions so that you're not as you're not feeling negative emotions on a consistent basis, and it obviously will give you more energy, which you can put towards applying to focus and study. From there, you don't want to cut out healthy habits that you already have. So if you find that you're eating healthy, you're exercising, you're doing things that recharge you, don't cut those out of your life for the sake of putting more time into coding. More time doesn't always equal better. And those activities that you're cutting out, like let's say hanging out with friends is a big one. If you're not hanging out with friends who you often hang out with and they give you more energy when you hang out with them, then it's not worth cutting them out. So any activity that you find that recharges you, whether that's you travel every once in a while, maybe you spend time with some of your extended family, exercise, sleep is a big one, like I had said before. All those activities are extremely important and you have to focus on them. It's not good to sacrifice time spent for recuperative activities just to add more to your coding. It's not like you can't always look at things like more coding is better. You have to know what is going to help you over the long term, because it's always the long term. Focus on long-term sustainability over the short-term shortcuts. So those are really the main ways that I, even myself, focus on the long term, and I don't have those burnout issues like I had before. So I certainly hope that this video has helped give you some clarity about how to get out of that nasty cycle that a lot of us get drawn into. And if you did enjoy this video, please leave a like. Also make sure to comment and let me know how this video helped. By the way, if you are interested in getting more content from me, I have a free Facebook group that you can join if you want to get more content like that from me. Sometimes I do some Q&A sessions. I keep spammers out of there. I try to keep the content as high quality as we can possibly make it. So if you're interested in joining that group, I will leave a link in the description below here. Go ahead and sign up as soon as you possibly can, and I guess I'll see you in there. So other than that, thank you so much for watching, and as always, guys, peace out.